Hello, welcome to the Central New York Women's Rights Corridor. Today we're visiting the birthplace of women's rights in America here in Seneca Falls and nearby Waterloo, New York. And I'm here with Megan Marley, one of our program participants from Seneca Falls High School.
Today's visit begins here at the Women's Rights National Historical Park in Seneca Falls. Operated by the U.S. National Park Service, it includes historical landmarks of the early women's suffrage movement located here along the Cayuga and Seneca Canal. The McClintock House, the Hunt House, the Elizabeth Cady Stanton House, and the Wesleyan Chapel, where the very first Women's Rights Convention was held in 1848. Next to the chapel is Freedom Park, which celebrates the Declaration of Sentiments, and the park's Visitor Center, which is where we begin today. Inside the center, there are amazing exhibits that illustrate the women's rights movement, especially the women who blazed the corridor's trail.
The centerpiece sculpture in the lobby is called The First Wave, a statue exhibit installed here in 1993 for the opening of the Seneca Falls Women's Rights National Historical Park. It was created and cast at an all-female foundry to commemorate the first Women's Rights Convention in 1848. Featured in the sculpture are Central New York anti-slavery and suffrage leaders Elizabeth Cady Stanton of Seneca Falls, Jane and Richard Hunt and Mary Ann and Thomas McClintock of Waterloo, Martha Coffin Wright of Auburn, Frederick Douglass of Rochester, and Lucretia and James Mott, who were prominent Quaker leaders and social reformers from Philadelphia.
These women gathered for tea in early July of 1848 at the Hunt House on Main Street in Waterloo, where Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was a young friend of Lucretia Mott and a newcomer to Seneca Falls, poured out her, quote, long accumulating discontent about discrimination she faced as a woman. Her friends were sympathetic and had similar stories, and they seriously considered the idea of creating a convention to demand equal rights for women.
Just a few days later, at Mary Ann's house, these friends together wrote the Declaration of Sentiments, which they modeled after the country's Declaration of Independence, and created plans for the very first Women's Rights Convention in the United States.
On July 19th and 20th of 1848, at the Methodist Wesleyan Chapel in Seneca Falls, they declared all men and women are created equal, and laid out their demands to guarantee women's equality, including the very controversial right to vote and hold office.
To learn more about that first convention and its outcomes, we have Mrs. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, portrayed by history professor Dr. Melinda Grube.
In the year 1848, amid my trials as an isolated and overworked young mother, the disenfranchised daughter of a judge and the indignant wife of an abolitionist, I sat down to tea with a small group of Quaker women in Waterloo, New York. In their sympathetic presence, I poured out the torrent of my long accumulating discontent with such vehemence and indignation that I stirred myself as well as the rest of the party to do and dare anything. Translating grievance into action, we, Jane Hunt, Martha Coffin Wright and her sister Lucretia Mott, Mary Ann McClintock and her adult daughters, Elizabeth and Mary Ann, and I planned a convention to address women's rights, the first of its kind. In the oppressive July heat, 300 people came together in an abolitionist church in the bustling canal town of Seneca Falls to consider women's rights and women's wrongs. For 2 days, we addressed such issues as property law, divorce, custody, education, and equal pay for equal work, moral double standards, and, most controversially, the elective franchise. Taking the Declaration of Independence as our inspiration and model, we presented our Declaration of Sentiments. We hold these truths to be self-evident, we said, with the audacity of those who know the time for patience is over, that all men and women are created equal. 68 women and 32 men signed the document and in so doing launched a revolution. As you look to us, so we too look to the past, to brilliant intellectuals. We drew on the courage of abolitionists like Charlotte Fortin, Maria Stuart, and Lucretia Mott, who called herself a radical of radicals and a heretic among heretics. In the years after the Seneca Falls Convention, conventions across the nation drew women to our cause. But for every success, there were a dozen failures, and the vote remained beyond our reach. With Susan B. Anthony, the constant companion of my rebellion, I preached revolution across this vast nation, from crowded city lecture halls to tiny country churches. We spoke the truth as we understood it. Somehow, between helping the boys with their schoolwork and nursing the baby, I found my voice. I demanded suffrage, education, professional opportunity, and equal pay for women. I declared that women must have the right of self-sovereignty, the right to divorce, and to limit the size of their families. When they opened their Bibles to deny our demand for equality, Matilda Jocelyn Gage and I demanded an end to the interference of the church in secular affairs. We wrote the Woman's Bible, challenged religion itself, and welcomed the howls of outrage that followed. Abigail Adams told her husband to remember the ladies. He thought it a joke. And we waited 72 long years before we found the opportunity and the courage to stand together in Seneca Falls. It was another 72 years before my granddaughter's generation. I demanded the vote for all and was told that I must take my turn. Insulted and discouraged, my prejudices overshadowed my principles, and I resorted to the cheap and destructive tools of racism and elitism. I tarnished my reputation, but worse, I injured a comrade who had stood by me from the day he stood up in Seneca Falls to add his voice to mine in the demand for universal human rights. But my friendship with Frederick Douglass endured. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. If that is our only legacy to you, it is enough.
We hope you enjoyed hearing about the girlfriends of Seneca Falls who turned their complaints into a movement.
The struggle for equality and inclusion continues. And as we women and girls take our rightful place at leadership and decision-making tables, we must be ready to accept a higher level of responsibility to uplift all those on the journey with us.
You can access the Explore More link on the First Amendment First Vote website to learn more about the change makers in today's video.